Graham Cassidy Heller Johnson is legislation in front of the U.S. Senate, another attempt to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act. I'm Brynne McBride of ABC for Health. Called Graham Cassidy for short, this bill was being touted as a compromise bill to try to give states more flexibility. It is instead just another attempt to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, but on a much more expedited timeline. We're going to talk about why they're trying to get this done so quickly in the U.S. Senate. But first, let's take a closer look at what this bill actually does. It eliminates protections offered under the Affordable Care Act, things like the individual mandate that says everybody has to have insurance or pay a penalty. It also eliminates the employer mandate. It eliminates the prohibition on discriminating against those with pre-existing conditions, lifetime caps, essential health benefits. This bill takes the Affordable Care Act and gets rid of most of the affordability and the guaranteed issue and the individual mandate provisions, and it says, let's get rid of all of that. Let's bring back pre-existing conditions, let's bring back lifetime caps, and let's get rid of essential health benefits in an attempt to appease the insurance industry, but mostly an attempt to give what the states are saying is a states' rights approach. Let the states get some money and decide what they're going to do with it instead of following this federal mandate that the Affordable Care Act was all about. It does more, though. It guts Medicaid. It takes the Medicaid expansion, it gets rid of it. It takes Medicaid as we know it and turns it into per capita caps. Instead, states would get a pot of money in the form of a block grant. And with that, they could do their own form of tax subsidy, something they would be getting rid of out of the Affordable Care Act to make coverage more affordable. Or they could create their own high-risk pools and take the flexibility that the legislation as written would give them to try to determine how they would run their own state program. Instead, again, like I said, of following the federal mandates. Gutting Medicaid to this degree is what has a lot of the moderates in the Senate quite nervous. Now you might be saying, wait, this sounds familiar. Like the Senate already took up this type of a bill and voted against it. Well, you're not that far off. The Better Care Reconciliation Act did go before the U.S. Senate and it was voted down. Remember, it was Senator John McCain out of Arizona that very dramatically voted no, giving the Senate 3 no votes in addition to all of the Democratic no votes that then prevented the Better Care Reconciliation Act from moving forward. This legislation, Graham Cassidy, is very similar to that Better Care Reconciliation Act, only it's worse. It impacts more people. It cuts more people from health coverage, and it does not save the federal government as much money. The cuts are extreme in this case. But you have to just take the senator's word for it at this point because the Congressional Budget Office, CBO, has not scored this yet. The Senate has a very short timeline to try to get this bill through. Senate parliamentarians said if you're going to use the budget reconciliation measure, which is the process they're trying to use with this bill, what they tried to use with Better Care Reconciliation Act, then you only have until September 30th to do it. Now, the Senate parliamentarian made these rules because the Senate said we want to only have a simple majority to have this bill go forward instead of traditional means of voting in the Senate. That is one of the provisions of using budget reconciliation is a simple majority. No filibuster is allowed. Well, if you're going to use those rules, then you have to do it before the end of the fiscal year, which ends September 30th. So senators have less than 2 weeks to try to do something. And as some of the political pundits have said, there is nothing that motivates the Senate more than a deadline. They had some of the more conservative Freedom Caucus members had this motivation from the start to try to repeal and replace. And if they want to actually follow through and say they repealed and replaced, they have to vote before September 30th. Now, there's a lot of doubt if that can happen because of some of the more extreme measures in this Graham Cassidy legislation. And Graham Cassidy, you might have remembered as being an amendment to the Better Care Reconciliation Act that was still left on the floor. It didn't get voted down and it wasn't voted on, and it became its own bill once Better Care Reconciliation Act failed on the Senate floor. So this was the last plan standing after that last round of debate. Well, now it has its own legs. It has Heller and Ron Johnson out of Wisconsin joining on, Heller out of Nevada, as 2 other sponsors, trying to appease more of the Senate Republicans to join them. Is it going to pass? That is the biggest question mark. Like we said, they're driving towards a deadline. If this does get voted on, and if it does pass, it then has to go to the House to try to reconcile. Remember, they voted on the American Health Care Act months ago. It was a short margin that had it a victory in the House, only 2 votes that made the American Health Care Act pass the House. This would now be the Senate's version of a repeal and replace bill. And if this succeeds here, it then has to go to the House and they have to reconcile those two bills. Can that happen? It's a big question mark again. It's possible that both bills could have succeeded on slim margins, and then maybe there is a slim margin there to actually achieve what the Senate, more conservative Republicans are going for. There are a lot of unknown questions. We're going to keep you posted as we learn more. In the meantime, we're giving you a couple links where you can read the bill itself. You can also read a couple articles of interest. This is a hot topic right now. Everybody's trying to see what their state is doing. You've got governors on both sides of the political aisle saying, don't gut my Medicaid program, don't take away my Medicaid expansion. And you have other interested parties weighing in because it is critical and because the time is so tight. Now, the Senate also has other important things they have to do. We have a couple other video case tips that you can visit that talk about, can they reauthorize the Children's Health Insurance Program by the end of September as well? Can they do a little bit more to help stabilize the debt and to get a budget passed beyond that short-term extension that was already passed? There's a lot on the table right now. The funding cliff for community health centers. This is going to be a busy Senate, but they seem to be prioritizing repeal and replace above all other things. We'll keep watching. We'll keep you informed as we go. Now, you can visit those links by clicking on the information button that you see at the bottom of the screen. You can also share your own Affordable Care Act story or Medicaid story. What would it look like if that disappeared because of a bill like Graham Cassidy? If you're watching us on YouTube, you can like or share or subscribe to our channel. Thanks for joining us.